The rejected mate. They said an omega without a mate was a shadow without substance, visible but easily erased. Yet on the morning Alpha King Kael Draven rejected Lyra Vale, the entire kingdom saw her more clearly than ever. The ceremony took place beneath the Moonstone Arch, where generations of rulers had claimed their destined lunas. The air carried the scent of pine and power, heavy with expectation. Lyra stood at the center of the clearing, her silver-brown hair loose over her shoulders, her hands trembling despite her effort to appear composed. She had stood beside Kael since childhood, through his first hunt, his father's funeral, his ascension to the throne. She knew the cadence of his voice, the tension in his jaw when he was conflicted, the way his golden eyes softened when he looked at her. Those eyes did not soften now. Lyra Vale, Kael declared, his voice echoing across the silent crowd. You are not my chosen mate. The words struck like a blade. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. A murmur rippled through the pack. Lyra felt it move across her skin like cold wind. She had sensed distance growing between them for months, political meetings, whispered negotiations. But she had believed their bond would withstand ambition. She had believed she was more than strategy. Selene Ardent stepped forward then, poised and radiant in crimson silk. She did not smile, but triumph shimmered in her gaze. Her family controlled the northern borders. Her alliance promised stability, expanded territory, and heirs with pure alpha lineage. She was everything a kingdom required. Lyra was not. Kael descended from a stone dais and extended his hand to Selene. The gesture was deliberate, practiced. Lyra saw the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled too tightly around Selene's. He was choosing the crown over the girl who had once rested her head against his chest beneath the same moon. A clean betrayal. The mating bond that had flickered between Lyra and Kael since adolescence did not shatter. It thinned, stretched painfully, but refused to disappear. That perhaps hurt most of all. I release you, Kael said quietly, though the words carried. Lyra swallowed. Pride steadied her spine. And I accept. She would not beg. She would not break before them. When the ceremony ended, the pack moved around her like water around stone. No one met her eyes. Rejection carried contagion. No one wished to share her disgrace. Lyra walked alone toward the forest's edge, toward the modest cottage that had belonged to her mother. It stood beyond the main settlement, close enough to remain within pack borders, far enough to be forgotten. Inside, the silence was merciful. She pressed her palm against her chest where the mate bond had once pulsed warmly. It still existed, faint but undeniable. Kael had severed the public tie, yet the deeper thread resisted. Whether that was weakness or fate, she did not know. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lyra opened the door to find a small wolf pup standing barefoot in the grass, tears streaking dirt across his cheeks. His name was Finn. She recognized him from the training grounds. He stared at her as if he had traveled miles. I couldn't find my mama, he whispered. Lyra crouched instantly. You're safe now. The words emerged instinctively, and something shifted in the air. The boy's trembling eased. He stepped into her arms without hesitation, pressing his face into her shoulder. Lyra felt warmth bloom beneath her skin, spreading outward in a quiet wave. Finn exhaled as though a storm had passed. Within the hour, his mother arrived in a panic, apologizing profusely. He ran off the moment he heard about the ceremony, she explained. We searched everywhere. Finn clung to Lyra until the last second, reluctant to leave. After they departed, Lyra stood in her doorway, unsettled. Children often sought comfort, but this felt different, intentional, as though some invisible thread had guided him to her. By dusk, another knock came, then another. A pair of twin girls who had argued with their father. A shy pup frightened of his first transformation. Each one arrived breathless, distressed, and calmed the moment they crossed her threshold. Lyra did not question it aloud. She brewed tea, mended scraped knees, hummed the lullaby her mother once sang under the full moon. The cottage filled with the quiet rhythm of trust. From the high balcony of the palace, Kael watched the lantern glow from her window flicker against the dark forest. Reports had reached him before sunset. Every lost pup is running to her, Beta Rowan had said carefully. They feel safe. Kael dismissed it at first. Coincidence. Emotion. After all, Lyra had always been gentle. But as night deepened, an unfamiliar unease settled into his chest. The bond between them pulsed faintly, responding not with longing, but with something stronger. Recognition. Lyra Vale had been rejected, yet the kingdom's most vulnerable were choosing her. And for the first time since the ceremony, Alpha King Kael Draven wondered whether he had misjudged not only her worth, but her power. The question lingered long after the palace lights dimmed, whispering of consequences yet to come. The king's divided heart. By the third night after the rejection ceremony, the palace felt colder than the forest. Kael Draven stood before the tall windows of his private chamber, the torches below casting fractured light across the stone courtyard. Beside him, the royal bed remained untouched. Selene Ardent had retired hours earlier, her movements precise, her silence pointed. The marriage had been sealed before witnesses, blessed by the council, yet something essential had failed to take root. He had secured an alliance. He had not secured peace. Your mind wanders, Selene observed from the doorway. Kael did not turn immediately. A king's mind always wanders. Her heels echoed softly as she approached. She was flawless even at rest. Dark hair braided with silver thread, posture impeccable, gaze sharp enough to dissect weakness. Your mind wanders beyond politics, she said. It wanders to the Omega. The word carried no title now. No name. Kael's jaw tightened. Lyra is no longer my concern. Selene studied him carefully. Then why do the guards report you standing at this window each night, facing the forest? The truth unsettled him because it was simple. He could feel her. The bond he had publicly severed refused to die quietly. It pulsed faintly beneath his skin, not as desire, but as awareness. Every time her cottage lantern flared to life, something within him stirred in response. Children are disappearing from their homes, Selene continued. They are found at her door. They are not disappearing, Kael corrected. They are choosing. Selene's eyes sharpened. Exactly. Her concern was not maternal. It was strategic. Influence over the young meant influence over the future. Kael understood the unspoken fear. An Omega with no rank should not command that kind of loyalty. I will investigate, he said at last. Selene inclined her head, satisfied with the concession. Do so quickly. Whispers grow faster than armies. When she left, Kael remained by the window a moment longer before summoning Beta Rowan Thorn. Rowan arrived within minutes, his expression neutral but perceptive. He had served beside Kael since adolescence and possessed the rare courage to speak honestly. You've heard the reports, Kael began. Yes, Rowan replied. The pups are drawn to her, not out of rebellion, out of instinct. Kael turned from the window. Instinct can be manipulated. Rowan held his gaze steadily. Lyra does not manipulate. She comforts. The defense was subtle but clear. Kael exhaled slowly. I need facts, not sentiment. Then here's one, Rowan said. Each pup who goes to her returns calmer, more confident. Night terrors vanish. Aggression eases. Even the trainers have noticed. That unsettled Kael more than panic would have. Fear could be controlled. Healing was harder to dismiss. Has she spoken against the crown? Kael asked. Never. That answer struck deeper than accusation would have. Kael dismissed Rowan and descended from the palace alone. He did not announce his departure. He did not require an escort. The forest parted easily before him, recognizing its alpha. Yet as he neared Lyra's cottage, he felt something unfamiliar. Hesitation. Soft light glowed through her windows. Laughter drifted faintly into the night. He approached without sound and stopped just beyond the clearing. Through the glass, he saw her seated on the floor. 3 small pups gathered around her. One leaned against her shoulder. Another traced idle patterns across her skirt. Lyra's expression was serene, not triumphant. She was not building an army. She was building safety. She looked thinner than he remembered, but stronger somehow. Rejection had not diminished her. It had refined her. One of the pups began to cry suddenly, overwhelmed by some private fear. Lyra placed her palm against the child's chest and closed her eyes. Kael felt the shift instantly, an invisible current passing through the clearing. The child's breathing steadied. The tension dissolved like frost beneath sunlight. Kael stepped back as though burned. He had felt that warmth once. Long ago, when nightmares from his father's death had plagued him. Lyra had sat beside his bed, whispering until his shaking stopped. He had called it affection then. Now he questioned whether it had been something more. The door opened abruptly. Lyra stood framed in lantern light, her gaze locking onto him without surprise. "You shouldn't lurk in shadows, Your Majesty." Her voice carried neither bitterness nor softness, only certainty. "I came for answers," Kael said. "About the children?" she asked. "About what you're doing to them." A faint crease appeared between her brows. "I'm reminding them they are not alone." The simplicity of it unsettled him. "You draw them without trying," he said quietly. "Why?" Lyra stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The night air tightened. "You rejected me publicly," she replied. "But the pact does not reject what it needs. That is not an answer. It is the only one you're ready for." Silence stretched between them, thick with unresolved truth. The mate bond flickered again, stronger this time, as though proximity fed it. Behind Lyra, one of the pups called her name. She glanced back briefly before returning her gaze to Kael. "You chose your crown," she said. "Now live with it." She stepped inside and closed the door. Kael remained in the clearing long after the lantern dimmed. He had expected anger, perhaps desperation. Instead, he had found composure and power he did not fully understand. As he turned toward the palace, a troubling realization followed him through the trees. He had not ended the bond when he rejected her. He had only awakened something stronger. And if the kingdom sensed it too, the true conflict had not begun at the ceremony. It was beginning now, the secret beneath the bond. By morning, the palace no longer whispered, it watched. Celine Arden stood at the head of the council chamber, her fingers resting lightly on the polished oak table as elders murmured around her. The reports had grown too frequent to ignore. Pups from respected bloodlines were slipping away from guarded homes and reappearing at Lyra Vale's cottage with stories of warmth, of safety, of a presence that quieted fear. Influence was shifting. When Kael entered, the chamber fell silent. His gaze swept across the council before settling briefly on Celine. Her expression was composed, but tension sharpened her posture. "Speak plainly," Kael ordered. Elder Melis, silver-haired and deliberate, inclined her head. "The children are responding to something ancient." Kael's jaw tightened. "Ancient how?" Melis's eyes flickered with restrained caution. "There are bloodlines within the pack that predate the crown. Lines tied not to dominance, but to balance, to protection." "Say her name," Celine said coolly. Melis did not hesitate. "Lyra Vale." The room shifted uncomfortably. Kael felt the weight of every gaze assessing him, not merely as king, but as the male who had cast her aside. "She is an Omega," Celine said. "Nothing more." Melis met her stare evenly. "Titles do not always define power." Kael dismissed the council with a curt gesture. When the doors closed, only Celine remained. "You see the danger," she said, her tone measured but urgent. "The pack's loyalty must remain centered on the throne. If they begin to look elsewhere—" "They are not rebelling," Kael interrupted. "They are seeking comfort." "Comfort breeds attachment," Celine replied. "Attachment breeds allegiance." Her logic was sound, yet it irritated him. Lyra had never sought allegiance. She had never craved recognition. She had wanted him, nothing more. "I will speak to her again," Kael said. Celine's gaze sharpened. "Alone?" "Yes." A fragile silence stretched between them. Suspicion lingered unspoken, but palpable. Kael turned before she could press further. The conversation was no longer about politics. It was about trust, and theirs was already strained. He found Lyra in the clearing behind her cottage at dusk. The children had gone home, their laughter replaced by the hush of approaching night. She stood barefoot in the grass, eyes closed, palms lifted slightly toward the rising moon. He felt it immediately, a subtle vibration in the air, like the forest itself exhaling. It did not overpower him, it steadied him. His restless thoughts slowed, his guarded instincts softened against his will. "You feel it now," Lyra said without opening her eyes. Kael stepped forward. "What are you?" Her eyes opened, luminous in the fading light. "I am what I have always been. That is not enough. For a king, it never is." He exhaled sharply. "The elders believe your bloodline carries something rare." Lyra regarded him carefully. "My mother told me stories when I was young, of Omegas who were not weak, only misunderstood, of those who soothed wolves when war left them fractured. She called it the moon, mother's blessing. Is it real?" She studied him for a long moment before answering. "When you woke screaming after your father died, who stopped the shaking?" The memory struck with precision. He had been 16, newly burdened by leadership, drowning in grief he could not display publicly. Lyra had sat beside him through endless nights, whispering until his breathing steadied. "You," he said quietly. "I did not understand it then," she continued. "But I felt something move through me, something that calmed not just you, but the storm inside you." Kael's pulse quickened, not with anger, but with recognition. "And the children? They are sensitive," she replied. "They feel instability before adults admit it. They feel your distance. They feel tension in the palace. They come to me because I quiet what frightens them." He absorbed her words slowly. "You never told me. You never asked," she said gently. The simplicity of that truth cut deeper than accusation. "Why reveal it now?" he demanded. Lyra's gaze hardened slightly. "Because you mistake it for ambition. I do not want a throne, Kael. I never did. I wanted you." The mate bond pulsed between them, stronger than it had since the ceremony. For a fleeting moment, the crown felt irrelevant, the forest more honest than the palace ever could be. Footsteps interrupted the silence. Selene emerged from the tree line, flanked by 2 guards. Her presence was controlled fury wrapped in elegance. "So it is true," she said softly. "Private meetings in the woods." Kael stiffened. "This is not what you think." Selene's gaze moved to Lyra, assessing, calculating. "You gather the packs, young. You draw the king from his palace. Tell me, Omega, what else are you capable of?" Lyra did not retreat. "Only what the pack needs." "And who decides that?" Selene demanded. Before Lyra could answer, one of the guards shifted uneasily. A young pup had wandered into the clearing unnoticed, drawn again by instinct. He ran directly to Lyra, clutching her hand. The moment her fingers closed around his, the tension in the air eased. Even the guards felt it. Selene saw it too. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Not jealousy, but fear. Kael understood then with chilling clarity. This was no longer about his heart. It was about balance of power. And as the moon rose higher above them, illuminating Lyra and the child at her side, he realized the kingdom stood at the edge of something far greater than a broken mating bond. It stood at the edge of choosing what kind of strength would lead it. And he was no longer certain the crown alone was enough. The choice before the crown. The summons was delivered at dawn. By midday, the entire pack had gathered beneath the Moonstone Arch, the same place where Lyra Vale had been publicly rejected. The symmetry was deliberate. Nothing in royal politics happened without intention. Kael stood at the center of the clearing in full ceremonial attire, the obsidian crown resting against his dark hair like a visible weight. To his right stood Selene Ardent, immaculate and composed, though tension lined her shoulders. To his left, a space had been left open. For Lyra, she arrived without escort. There were no silks, no ornaments, no attempt to impress. She wore a simple gray dress, her hair unbound, her expression steady. Yet as she stepped into the clearing, the atmosphere shifted in a way no one could ignore. Whispers stilled. Even the restless pups at the edge of the crowd grew quiet. Power did not always roar. Sometimes it settled like calm after chaos. Elder Melis raised her staff. "We convened to address unrest within the pack." Selene spoke first. Children abandoning their homes. A divided loyalty. a king distracted from his duties. Her gaze slid briefly toward Kael before returning to Lyra. The source is clear. Lyra did not flinch. The children return home willingly. No one is held against their will. That is not the accusation, Selene replied coolly. Influence can be more dangerous than force. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Kael stepped forward. Enough. We will deal in truth, not insinuation. Selene inclined her head, but her eyes flashed with restrained challenge. Then ask her plainly. Kael turned to Lyra. For a fleeting second, the ceremony of it all faded, and he saw only the girl who had once stood beside him under starlight. But this was no longer private. The pack watched. The crown demanded clarity. Lyra Vale, he said evenly, do you claim authority beyond your rank? She met his gaze without hesitation. I claim no authority. I offer presence. The children come because they sense instability. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. Kael felt it too. And what instability do they sense? He asked quietly. Her answer came without malice. A king divided between duty and truth. The word struck harder than open rebellion would have. Selene stepped forward sharply. You presume too much. No, Lyra replied, her tone unwavering. I refuse to pretend. A sudden cry broke through the tension. A young pup, no more than 6, pushed free from the crowd and ran toward the center. His mother tried to catch him, but he slipped past her grasp and collided gently with Lyra's side, clutching her hand. The clearing fell silent. Please don't send her away, the child pleaded, his small voice trembling but loud enough to carry. She makes the bad dreams stop. His words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Kael felt something inside him fracture, not weakness but denial. He had built his reign on strength defined by dominance, by alliances forged in steel and blood. Yet here stood proof of a different kind of influence, one that required no command. Elder Meili stepped forward slowly. There are legends, she said, her voice resonant, of Omegas born with the moon, mother's blessing. Not to rule, but to restore balance when power grows unsteady. Selene's composure finally cracked. Stories meant to soothe peasants, not guide kingdoms. Stories survive because they carry truth, Melis replied calmly. Kael closed his eyes briefly. The mate bond pulsed, stronger now, not with longing but with inevitability. He understood the crossroads before him. To deny Lyra's gift would secure political stability, for now. To acknowledge it would shift the structure of authority within the pack. Both paths carry consequence. He opened his eyes and stepped forward, placing himself between Selene and Lyra. I made a choice weeks ago, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. I chose alliance over instinct, crown over connection. Selene stared at him, disbelief tightening her features. I believe strength meant control, he continued. But control without balance breeds fear. He turned to face the pack fully. Lyra Vale has committed no crime. She has offered comfort where leadership created uncertainty. The admission cost him pride, but not conviction. Selene's voice lowered, edged with steel. And what does that mean for your queen? The question cut cleanly to the heart of the matter. Kael did not answer immediately. Instead, he removed the obsidian crown from his head. Gasps echoed through the clearing. He did not set it down. He simply held it in his hands, as though weighing it. A crown does not define strength, he said quietly. The pack does. His gaze shifted to Lyra. For the first time since the rejection ceremony, there was no barrier of ceremony between them, only truth. I rejected you publicly, he said, his voice steady but raw beneath the surface. Not because you were weak, but because I feared what I did not understand. Lyra's expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with recognition. I will not force you into a role you did not seek, Kael continued, but neither will I deny what stands before us. The mate bond surged, undeniable now, felt not just between them, but sensed by those closest to the clearing. Selene stepped back slowly, her silence heavier than accusation. The pack watched, suspended between old order and emerging truth. Kael lowered the crown slightly, not relinquishing it, yet not wearing it either. Today, he declared, "We decide what kind of strength will guide this kingdom." The clearing held its breath. And for the first time since the ceremony of rejection, the future no longer seemed predetermined. It waited, fragile and unfinished, for the choice that would reshape them all.